So I'm the co-chair of the Marketing and Education Committee at the MEF, and I'm also leading the 5G focus group. In my day job, I work for Netcracker, responsible for SDN and NFV solutions. And I have two presentations today, one on Lso API. This is this one, another one later on 5G. So they gave me like 50 slides to cover in 35 minutes. I don't know how I can do that. So let's try to make it interactive. I think the intention was that you'll have the material, not that I'll cover everything. So let's try to make it interactive. So I'm saying now, I'll not take question at the end. You want to ask question, ask during the presentation. So what I'm going to cover? I'm going to cover the Lso Reference Architecture, the different projects around LSO, and then we'll talk a little bit about the open source and other standard body that we are working with, and some of the projects. So let's start with the Lso Reference Architecture. So Pascal already covered the 4 layers. We'll talk about the API. So the idea here is to develop a model that you can automate your network, orchestrate your services based on what the end user intend to do. So if you look at your network, what we want to get to every operator is the user will have a self-service portal. They communicate what they try to do. They don't really care about the network, if it's layer 1, layer 3, SD1. They're basically saying, that's a service I need, no more than that. And then you have the business application, the orchestration that will realize that service for the customer. So this is the MEF lifecycle service orchestration. We are talking about the whole life cycle. Part of it is provisioning, but it's the whole thing. And if we take a closer look at the MEF LSO, we have the customer that either order or want to get some information about the service, maybe analytics, maybe debugging. And on the LSO side, we have the service and the network. And those are the APIs, the API that we defined. So on the customer, we define Cantata and Allegro. From the business application to the service, it's Legato. That's the northbound from the orchestrator, and the southbound is Presto to the network controller. From the network to the device, it's Adagio. And I promise, if we have time, I'll go and explain each one of them. That's the main idea, how to automate and orchestrate your services. Okay, now, if we are talking about end-to-end services, some of the customers, some of the tunnels are not in our footprint. They are off-net. We need to talk to other carriers. We want to talk to other carriers. There are also 2 APIs, Sonata and Interlude. Sonata is for the ordering. Interlude is more for the real time, and I'll also cover them. So this is in a nutshell. What is MEF 55? MEF 55 is the reference architecture of the LSO. The idea here is we are trying to orchestrate the services. We are trying to hide the complexity. So we overcome the complexity by abstraction. As I said before, the end user doesn't care how we implement the service. He also doesn't care that we need to contact another operator in order to go off-net. They care about the connectivity or any service they are getting. Maybe it's a point service like security. So the whole idea is that we hide the complexity for them, and they just have to speak their intent. The reference architecture is agnostic to the technology. As I said before, we don't care what services. As Pascal mentioned before, we support today layer 2. Layer 1 service definition is coming. Layer 3 is coming this year. And over-the-top services like SD-WAN, like security. So this is a diagram of the whole service end-to-end. We have two operators. We have the customer that can consume connectivity, can consume cloud services, and the whole idea is to automate the customer request and have an end-to-end service, whether it's 2, 3 different operators that need to realize that service, and everything is automated. Everything is on demand. Customer can go and change bandwidth, add applications, fully automated, fully orchestrated on demand. Okay, so with the lifecycle service orchestration, we focus on those interfaces. If I go back, when I say interfaces, Legato, this is the interface, Presto, and we focus on developing API for those interfaces. The API are based on the use case. We can have an API for ordering. We can have an API for analytics. So we are focused on, our focus is to develop the different API for the different interfaces. Focus was on Sonata. Many operators wanted to solve the inter-operator connectivity. Presto between the orchestrator and the one controller. And Legato is the northbound from the orchestrator to the business logic. So what did we do? So we have the reference architecture, and we are working on the API. And as Pascal said, we moved to more agile process. So while we are developing the standard, we are also start writing code, start writing the interfaces, and trying to see how it works. So when the standard is not done, we call it experimental APIs. And the idea is that we can provide our users a starting point, some code that they can start using. They can exercise those API. They are called experimental because standard is not done yet. Once the standard is done, we can align with the standard and it will be an SDK. But this is available today for MEF member on MEFnet to try to work on, test, and expand. The whole idea is to bring more collaboration. We do it through hackathon, through POC, and through MEF implementation projects. So this is the Lso Reference Architecture. Let's see, I think I have some time, so I can go through some of the interfaces. So Cantata, it's between the customer portal and the business logic. And this is the product catalog, the ordering, the visibility of the product, if I have it or not, and the billing, all the things that you need to in order to order a service. Then we have Sonata, very similar, but this one is between operators. So I need to serve as a customer that is off-net. I have another operator. I need to query. Is the service that I want is available, right? I need to order it, right? All the billing, all the testing to get the service going and connect that off-net customers. Then I have Legato. Legato is a northbound interface from the orchestrator. And this is to the business logic. By the way, Legato was also adopted by ONAP, if you're familiar with ONAP. So ONAP is using Legato to connect from the orchestrator to the OSS BSS. And you can see it. And again, this is in this layer, northbound of the orchestrator, we are talking services. So it's the service visibility, the configuration of the surface, the usage, all of that. Policy. Then we have Presto. Now, this is southbound of the orchestrator. So now we are talking network. We are talking connectivity, network function, configuration. For example, we have a project of provisioning, activation, and testing of services. So this is all Presto, right? So it's a topology of the network, all of that. Then we have Adagio. Adagio is from the controller down to the device. So in some cases, you will need it. Some cases it will be proprietary. So for example, in layer 1, each layer 1 vendor has its own controller, and orchestrator talking Presto to the layer 1 controller, and Adagio is probably proprietary. So in Adagio, we provide more freedom for the operator or the vendor to select whatever needed. It can be netconf-young, it can be OVSDB, it can be, for example, a proprietary or maybe another SDN like OpenFlow. We give more freedom there. We don't define much in Adagio, but it's there, and it's supported. There are many modules that supported it. One thing that we did, if this controller is ODL, for example, we have a project Unimanager that basically an ODL interface that talk Presto to the orchestrator, just as an example. What else left? The real-time protocol, the east-west real-time. So east-west, we have Allegro. That is a real-time between the portal and the orchestrator. And similar, we have Interlude, that is a real-time between operators. So this is when the service is already active, and now we need to maybe control, change, debug, get some information. So we use the real-time interlude between the operators. Does this make sense? Any questions? Okay. So I already mentioned the ONAP adopted Legato. So Legato is used. We release Presto and Sonata SDKs, and we also released the standard. If you were at MEF 17, we had a big POC of, I think it was AT&T, Orange, and Colt that were using Sonata to have services between among those three operators. Just last week, is Peter here? Maybe not. Just last week, Verizon and Colt announced that they implemented a connection between them using Sonata. Presto, as I said, was also adopted by ODL. So you have the Unimanager using Presto for carrier internet services. Any more questions? Yes?
Do we have also available an SDK for interlude or
Give us some time. Give us some time. It's, MEF is a member-driven organization, and it's member-driven. So member told us we need to solve Presto for the use case of service activation and testing. That's the most important thing. So we start that with CenturyLink and other. And member told us that we need to have Sonata so we can communicate among different operators. I know what some of you are thinking, that, oh, I don't need to connect to other operators. I have SD1, I can use the internet, get to any customer. It doesn't work for SLA-based services, doesn't work for high availability services. Operators need to have the connectivity among them. Similar to what you have today with your cell phone, right? you can call any number around the world, and you don't really care how many network your call is going, right? So the same way we want to do with the network.
So Interlude's being worked on now. So there are many projects working on these different points. Legato, Interlude, Sonata.
I have a few slides on that, Pascal. I have a slide on that, yes. Okay, let's talk about some of the community projects that Pascal mentioned. Those are the projects that already completed. So on the life cycle, we have the service life cycle, the care Ethernet framework. Those are all, for reference, those are completed. Even if you are not a MEF member, you can go and download the spec. Right, on the orchestration, as I said, MEF 55, and we just released 2 weeks ago, MEF 59 and MEF 60, which are the APIs for the network resource model and the provisioning. So you can download and look at it from the services, the Young model for MEF services. This is still a work in progress. So just as a reference, we are talking about MEF 57, which is the access, service OEM, and service activation and testing. On the orchestration, we are adding security. And on the modeling, we are talking more about core modeling and policy-driven orchestration. If I have time, I'll cover more on the modeling. People always ask me how MEF relate to other organizations, whether standard body or open source. So we want to cover this a little bit. So ONAP. Many are asking about ONAP. ONAP now is a part of Linux Foundation. It used to be OpenEComp and OpenOD that merged together. And the focus now is on NFV, orchestration, automation. And first of all, MEF is a member of ONAP, and we collaborate a lot with ONAP. Linux Foundation is also a member at MEF, work a lot together. As I mentioned before, Legato was adopted already by ONAP. We view ONAP as one of the way to implement MEF LSO. We had, in MEF 17, we had a POC of 3 operators. 2 of them had ONAP, so we had ONAP talking to ONAP using Sonata. The third one did not have ONAP, so ONAP talking to non-ONAP using Sonata. And the ONAP to ONAP is not just a POC, it's actually a project under MEFnet, the MEF platform. So we actually have ONAP instances running on MEFnet, and we continue testing the APIs and enhancing it. And any MEF member can join those projects if they want to, depend on the state of the project. Maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe you want to have a new project, but we encourage our member to come, join, and contribute, do some work, test. Getting involved is very important. So that's about ONAP, an important piece. And by the way, many MEF members contribute to ONAP, and many ONAP members contribute to MEF. There's a lot of collaboration there. ONF. ONF is, I have to say, many members of ONF are also contribute to MEF. What we did, we took for layer 1, we adopted the TAPI interface for layer 1. So if I just go back, I'm talking about TAPI here. So as you know, ONF wanted to have a a unified node-bound interface from the controller. We use that. However, TAPI doesn't understand services. It's to configure the layer 1. We added TAPI into Presto, so now we understand the service. And this is most of the collaboration we have with ONF. So when you need Presto for layer 1, it's TAPI based. Attis, we had a lot of work with Attis on service ordering. This work that was ongoing for 2 years already. TM-Form. TM-Form, there are a few things that we did with TM-Form. The Sonata interface is based on the TM-Form API. We have a lot of collaboration with TM-Form and also with the Catalyst. We're trying to do like a POC showing how things work, MEF and TM-Form. Again, on the API, there's a lot of collaboration, and I'll talk later on about the modeling, what we are trying to do with TM-Form and ONAP. Last one is ODL. So with ODL, the network resource provisioning project, it's basically, as I said, it's a plugin node-bound from ODL. So if we go back to the reference architecture, if this is ODL, we have the node-bound interface. So basically, we can support Presto on ODL. And this is the ONAP implementation of the LSO framework. So that's how we view, if you were to take ONAP and use it as MEF LSO, that's how we view it. So ONAP is configuring your network. ODL is already part of ONAP. To the business logic, we are using Legato. So node-bound interface of ONAP, it's Legato. And between the operators, we are talking Sonata for the ordering, and for the real time, we are talking interlude. Does this make sense? Yes? No? Okay. So this is just the reference architecture of LSO and the ONAP ecosystem, just to show where we see the similarity. So this is the SDN controller and the orchestrator, and this is how we see the interfaces. Okay? Make sense? Very similar. Orchestrator is an orchestrator. We need to get the same functionality going. Okay. Now I'll talk a little bit about the API, the experimental API project. So as I said, the product of the MEF is the standard, the API standard. However, we would like to provide the user a way to start. We'd like to provide the user some code, some reference code, so they can start with the API. And this is the code that we are writing even before the standard is completed. And it's also good for us. The guys who write the code provide feedback to the guys who write the spec, and vice versa. So it gets our final delivery much better from the get-go. Instead of having 2-3 iterations till we get the feedback from the market after we release it, we get the feedback right away. So we are getting good feedback and better spec to begin with. So this is what we already did. The network resource and the Sonata, the ordering and serviceability. We are improving the Sonata. This is the R2. And this is the plan moving forward. So as Pascal said, we are planning to work on Allegro, on Legato even this year. So as you can see, the plan is to attack all this API except Adagio that I said. This is really vendor specific. We provide more freedom to the vendor to decide how to use it. So I'll talk a little bit about Sonata. I don't think I have a lot of time. So I'll talk a little bit about Sonata and Presto. So Sonata is the connectivity between the service providers. We took the use case of E-line and we implemented it. So basically, we adopted the TM-Form API and we implement the interface, and we have more than 20 companies that are working on that, are interested in that, and adopting the LSO Sonata. And I think you'll see more. The way we speak with many operators, many are interested in that. This is the releases. I'll not go over it, but you will have the slides. So this is what you are getting with release 1. Mendy's ordering and serviceability. This is what you are getting with release 2.
Release 2 just got released.
Yes. This is the PR that we had a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, about release 2. So this is what you have today. If you are downloading Sonata, this is what you are getting. And this is what we are planning to add. So we'll have the whole stack at release 3. This is release 1. Do we have release 2 here? Yes. So this is what we have in release 1. Basically, serviceability and ordering. So I can query what is available, and I can get a new order. And this is what we have in release 2 that we just released. So now we are talking about ordering, ticketing, and also quote. Okay? I have a few minutes. I would like just to talk a little bit about the model-driven paradigm. So we are working now with ONAP TM-Form and ONF. We are trying to go to a model-driven API. The idea is that we create the modeling, and then we can focus on the tools to create API from the models. So this is a fairly new approach that we are trying to do. There are many, many APIs. We would like to try to automate the API creation. And we're actually meeting, I think it's next week, right? At ONS. We are meeting with ONAP to discuss some of it. So the main idea is to work on the modeling and have some tool so we can automate the API creations. I think that's all I have. So if there are no questions, I'll leave the room for Mark for the next presentation. Any questions? Great. Mark, the floor is yours. Thank you.